is about Open Atlanta, which is open government. How many people have heard of open government concept? Open society. So it can be two sides. Open government can refer to like steps the government's taking to be more transparent, but it's also about opening the data to the community, and that's the side we're on. And Open Atlanta was started about a month and a half ago, and the idea is to collaborate, bring the tech community and the web community basically to collaborate with nonprofits and government officials and people in the community in general. It's a lot about large data sets being released from the government, as well as taking the info and making it a little more user-friendly. And the goal, one of the main goals is to use Drupal on this effort. A little bit about me. Kind of the first app I got into was I was at an MBA program at UC Davis, and created a program that took financial statement downloads from Thomas service, and just across multiple years, and you could identify different flags for when a company was kind of possibly running amok, and then we made financial decisions off of that, or investments off of that. After school, I was the CFO at Altera Bioenergy, and so CFO, it's a great title. Basically, I was the whole accounting department. I built, when I came in, we were kind of like quarter of the way through one of our first plants, and really it was, the whole thing was in the head of the construction manager, who had like no high school diploma, so kind of used a project to get the chemical engineers and the construction people kind of on one page. And then so I was, being in accounting, I was kind of the data guy, so I ended up building the website. And bioenergy hasn't really taken off, to say the least. So following that, I was doing consulting in green energy and in the environment, and I started building websites. And so with that, I started noticing, this was like 2009, that the government is actually making an attempt to build better websites and to get information out. And there's a lot of tools, so kind of started getting interested at that point. And now, so with Active, I build websites, small business and nonprofits, and also trying to get into working with some startups, and I've been doing hackathons over at Georgia Tech. And last June did a hackathon called Random Hacks of Kindness, which is like a hackathon for social purposes. And so with the hackathon, it's a weekend or several days to kind of get an app together, put it out there. And one thing with the local group is we notice is there's not really much follow through on how to get it used actually. So it's just built, and it's kind of just lodges there. So we started thinking about doing a website. In September, another group called Code for America, they started what they call a brigade program, where they're going to, different cities can form a brigade to launch these kind of applications. And in October, they started a Race for Reuse campaign. And what it is basically just using an application that's already been made and getting it on the local site. So they've got some incentives for this, like a marketing budget, going to provide some web hosting, meetup budget. So that's kind of the incentive why I've push development of this forward, and then Drupal Camp was another reason to push it forward, because I want to, get the Drupal piece of it lodged before we launch the full site. So we're going to launch now on November 6th, and then try to reach some marketing goals by Thanksgiving. Possibly they're going to move that back to Christmas. This is really, I started looking around for the different groups that are doing this kind of hackathon or coding for good, and there's way more than I've got here, but there's like 10 of them, 20 more, and the problem is, sorry, let's see, complications. So there's 20 groups doing this. They've got, each of them have got people doing apps, and they're doing whatever technology they think is good or the flavor of the month. So you've got 20 groups with 20 different platforms with maybe 20 different mapping systems, and so you can see that it's getting exponentially more fractured. And so I liked at the business summit, Josh Clark spoke today, but he also spoke yesterday, and one of his points I liked was complicated is not the same as complex. So the government is, issues are complex, but the government solutions are complicated, meaning that something is complex if there's a lot of facets to it. It's complicated when you can't, it's hard to find out what those facets are. And so the problem is government is, takes a stab at something, and then, another year they take a new stab at it, and they're not coordinated. And nonprofit industry is the same way. If you talk about like the response in Haiti, you'll just have hundreds of NGOs there, kind of all cross purposes. So unfortunately, the nonprofit industry is complicated, and as I said, the code, this coding for good has been complicated because there's just a lot of different industries and a lot of technologies going at it. So that's why the race for reuse is a good concept, in that it's like trying to get more people working on one solution. So why Drupal? Well, first, I think the idea of Open Atlantis is to have one website where you can bring in the different solutions and work on, bring them together to work on a single problem. Drupal fits into it because, as some of the talks have been about, Drupal's made a lot of inroads into the government. White House, a ton of state agencies are on Drupal, a ton of federal agencies are on Drupal, and this last point is that, so it's international as well, and the governments of the US and India released an open government platform that is Drupal. And you can actually go to that website and download a version of it to play with. And so it's important, so that, now there's three different things. So there's like a government agency site, which is about transparency, and that's what the government does. An open government platform is going to be the public-facing site where they're going to release data to the public. And then the third is what we're doing, say, like a group of developers in the community, which would take that data and use it in new ways. So down here, so if you went to this, data.gov, that's where the data repositories would be. Another thing the government is doing is challenge.gov, and this is, different agencies are seeking solutions to these problems. And a lot of times sometimes they're, might take special expertise, but a lot of times they're design problems. And that's really where the private sector, the developers can do more than the government can do, just for incentives. And so I should go back, but there's, like right now, there's something like 200 of these challenges going on, And this was a health records challenge, 26,000. So, you know, that's something, I don't know about challenges, but if you're interested, it's also, go ahead.
So the challenge is based on basically, you know, like an RFP, but really it's up to the government to determine which was the best solution to their challenge. Is it just strictly volunteer? Because I see prizes there and dollar amounts, but I'm assuming it's for the best solution to their challenge.
Right.
So it's like a sort of spec work contest, right?
Yeah, you can say that. And,
Spec work contest.
and there's a lot of, yeah, there's a lot of the challenge things out there, you know, and I think you'd have to evaluate each one independently to see, you know, what the history is and whether it's worth it. What I was going to say, though, just to follow on to that, is that, you know, you don't have to, I mean, we're going to be doing volunteer, we'll talk about volunteer development later on, but, you know, if you've got a really good idea with this data, you can, you know, do a business out of it, so might be a better way to go. And on, you know, speaking of money, so, you know, it's whatever the government is like 30% of the economy or 40%, so it's a huge amount of money involved in this stuff. So we're going to do an Open Atlanta site in Drupal, and kind of got started on it, and then stop, but you can see this is kind of your basic Omega install, and so basically, if you haven't figured out yet, this is a call for, this is a help wanted session. Just probably I don't have too many people here, but you know, looking for designers. Kind of the way the thing, you know, this is going to be organic groups, and it's going to be set up. We're going to be Metropolitan Statistical Atlanta, and then we might have subgroups that are like Decatur, Gwinnett, you know, downtown, whatever. And then each region will then, you know, have different issues that they're concerned with, and out of the issues will come a project. So the idea, what's different from, you know, this than a hackathon is we want to really get a real community and a real problem being addressed by the development. A little more on the technology. So wanted to use Git and because I don't know, have you guys heard a Git talk today? I'm kind of, I don't know, I just noticed like maybe, I'm glad I never actually learned Subversion. You know, I was about to learn Subversion, and then it's like Git was coming on the radar, and I'm like, all right, wait for Git. And now Git's like taking over the world. And let's see, just wanted to do, this was a TED Talk on about open government, and I have to refresh the page.
It provides a canonical copy of the software on a server somewhere.
You don't hear that?
The only programmers who can change it are people who've specifically been given permission to access it. And they're only allowed to access the subsection of it that they have permission to change. And when people draw diagrams of version control systems, the diagrams always look something like this. They look like org charts. And you don't have to squint very hard to see the political ramifications of a system like this. This is feudalism. One owner, many workers. Now, that's fine for the commercial software industry. It really is Microsoft's Office. It's Adobe's Photoshop. The corporation owns the software. The programmers come and go. But there was one programmer who decided that this wasn't the way to work. This is Linus Torvalds. Torvalds is the most famous open source programmer, created Linux, obviously. And Torvalds looked at the way the open source movement had been dealing with this problem. Open source software, the core promise of the open source license, is that everybody should have access to all the source code all the time. But of course, this creates the very threat of chaos you have to forestall in order to get anything working. So most open source projects just held their noses and adopted the feudal management systems. But Torvalds said, no, I'm not going to do that. His point of view on this was very clear. When you adopt a tool, you also adopt the management philosophy embedded in that tool. And he wasn't going to adopt anything that didn't work the way the Linux community worked. And to give you a sense of how enormous a decision like this was, this is a map of the internal dependencies within Linux, within the Linux operating system. Which subparts of the program rely on which other subparts to get going. This is a tremendously complicated process. This is a tremendously complicated program. And yet for years, Torvalds ran this, not with automated tools, but out of his email box. People would literally mail him changes that they'd agreed on, and he would merge them by hand. And then, 15 years after looking at Linux and figuring out how the community worked, he said, I think I know how to write a version control system for free people. And he called it Git. Git is distributed version control. It has two big differences with traditional version control systems. The first is that it lives up to the philosophical promise of open source. Everybody who works on a project has access to all of the source code all of the time. And when people draw diagrams of Git workflow, they use laws for the overall effect.
This is
There's
talking about
that
Git
as a
with
site for
legal
source code management.
sense.
But there's also the fact that the law is another place where there are many opinions in circulation, but they need to be resolved to one canonical copy. And when you go onto GitHub and you look around, there are millions and millions of projects, almost all of which are source code. But if you look around the edges, you can see people experimenting with the political ramifications of a system like that. Someone put up all the WikiLeaks cables from the State Department along with software used to interpret them, including my favorite use ever of the Cablegate cables, which is a tool for detecting naturally occurring haiku in State Department prose. The New York Senate has put up something called open legislation, also hosted on GitHub, again for all of the reasons of updating and fluidity. You can go and pick your senator, and then you can see a list of bills they have sponsored. Someone going by DiveGeek has put up the Utah Code, the laws of the state of Utah, and they've put it up there not just to distribute the code, but with the very interesting possibility that this could be used to further the development of legislation. Somebody put up a tool during the copyright debate last year in the Senate saying, it's strange that Hollywood has more access to Canadian legislators than Canadian citizens do. Why don't we use GitHub to show them what a citizen-developed bill might look like? And it includes this very evocative screenshot. This is called a diff, this thing on the right here. This shows you, for text that many people are editing, when a change was made, who made it, and what the change is. The stuff in red is the stuff that got deleted, the stuff in green is the stuff that got added. Programmers take this capability for granted. No democracy anywhere in the world offers this feature to its citizens for either legislation or for budgets, even though those are the things done with our consent and with our money. Now, I would love to tell you that the fact that the open source programmers have worked...
Clay Shirky at TED, it's pretty cool to check it out, the whole thing. But that kind of, expanded my mind, the idea of like writing legislation with Git. But needless to say, it's even just for practical uses, it's extremely important in development. So, going to be using Git. We'll have multiple sites. With Omega, it's going to be HTML5. and with also want to use SAS, which is with HTML5 and the responsive, you get into problems with Explorer, and so SAS is it's another step removed from CSS to be cross-browser. Government sites have usability considerations, so they have to be read by people that might not be able to see as well. And the heart of it's going to be organic groups, possibly the Drupal Commons distribution. And the other big technology is web services. So Josh Clark's other, I think the big line was metadata is the next art direction. And it's the idea that you've got to be able to send the data out of whatever system it is and to some new form factor. And so, even though here, the site's going to be the mothership is Drupal, but the hacks, the apps will be in different systems that people want to use. And so, really the key is how we go from Drupal to using these other services. So I'm looking for, Drupal developers, server admins. Be great to get somebody with Git, somebody with SAS, and then designers, graphic designs, research and content, outreach and marketing. Go back. So I'm saying that because, as I mentioned, we're one of the spurs to kind of getting going now is this race for reuse, and what we're trying to do is we're going to pick one of 4 applications to launch, and then what's interesting about this is it's I call it maybe like a campaign-a-thon. So it's not just about the technology, it's about how many people we can get using the technology. So this is a good chance for anybody that's not a hardcore programmer to get involved with the social media aspect of it, the research aspect of it, SEO aspect of it, content. I don't have too much of a presentation, so I'll just let you guys look at these 4 apps that they've put out there. The first one's Adopt a Hydrant, and basically the idea was to say there's some infrastructure, a hydrant. I think this was started in Chicago, and the developer wanted a way for people to get involved, taking care of their community, so they can adopt a hydrant in their local nearby, and then put it on the map and say, we're going to take care of this piece of infrastructure, and it's being used in Hawaii for a hurricane siren, and Chicago or New York for snow removal. So another app is Textizen, which is a feedback tool. You can put out a location and say maybe some kind of a poll, like what would you like to see here, what should we do with this old building, and citizens can text back in what they think the response is. Another one is a local wiki, which is a wiki it's software that's a little bit easier to use, and the idea is that you would have a wiki that was just on local, that might not make it to MediaWiki or Wikipedia. And Shareabouts is, let's see, what is this one? Crowdsourcing. I guess so, where you would locate a bike share program. So which of these do y'all think we could, would get the most adoption? Share, what do you think?
I think from a concreteness, the adopt a something, the adopt a hydrant, we already have adopt a street or whatever, adopt a highway. This is like a way to make people more likely to adopt.
So is the strategy of OpenAtlanta.net to work on stuff like this throughout the community, like the developers community that work on stuff?
I think it's a mix of bringing through lots of people, right? Not just developers, but the designers and the non-tech community, sort of bringing everybody.
Yeah.
Citizen advocacy.
So,
Have you noticed any pattern about like the hackathons you've been doing? Postpress? Like what's the top like app or the main concern with citizens? Because I've never done any development for volunteer nonprofits.
that's a good question. We've done a lot of the hacks of a lot of times at Georgia Tech. So it's interesting because it's pretty international. We had a group that did kind of this idea of I paid a bribe, which is being used in India to document when there's some kind of corruption, and they don't. So it's all anonymous. You're not, the reporter's anonymous, but then also you don't say like who asked you to pay a bribe. It's not about like legal action, because then you start having to identify them or get into that thing. So, but you just go on a map and see how much corruption's going on, and they can say, we got to stop this. That was well received. There was an app called I Wish This Were. These started in Austin, and kind of an artist had this idea of getting like kind of like tags you'd wear at a meeting, and then but sticking them, and it would say I wish this were, and people would just write in like something like I wish this was a soccer field, and so then the app that was developed was just locating those. You could see what different people had put in different areas. So right now it's technology wise, everybody wants to do mobile, geolocation based. And so it's interesting you said the wiki. So I didn't want to like wait till November 3rd to actually get the app up and running. So I went ahead and installed a local wiki. So it would be at wiki.openatlanta.net. And you can see it's a little, how it's different than Wikipedia is. It's just a lot simpler interface, just a simple editor. You still can have some control on you could like require a comment to make the change. You'd know who did it. Some entries could be anonymous, some could be just a certain group. The other thing is it's really I'm not sure, I haven't looked at Wikipedia, but I don't think it's too much location based, whereas this is can be really location based. Like each entry could have some point on this map. So different places are doing different things. Like Santa Cruz is doing like a kind of a nature map. Raleigh Durham is doing an old building kind of historic site map, and then the Wikipedia entry. The problem with this to me though is this is where I get back to my Drupal side and like so there's like no SEO in here, no you can just start thinking of all these different modules you'd want that Drupal would have, and I think Drupal does have like some capability of making wikis, so I'm kind of like, I'd rather make it in Drupal. But really, I mean, it's just once you like get into it, the possibilities are just endless. Like the idea of like using Git for legislation. And one thing, there was another speech at TED that was just saying that to think about those, that like politics is just like the waves on the ocean, and government is like the whole sea. So, I think probably staying away from politics to get started with, and trying to go for just improving government services. Any questions? So next Saturday, we're going to just meet and just kind of talk about the apps and launch one, or probably launch two, and talk about how to promote them by the end of the year. And then, so on December 1st is the Random Hacks of Kindness group will be having a hackathon at Georgia Tech. And then, so when we get our money from Code for America, we'll try to start having a monthly meetup next year. And feel free to contact me. Any questions? Yeah.
I think both you and you mentioned this notion about legal stuff. And could you kind of expand that or clarify that a little bit there? I mean, were you just looking at it from the standpoint of sort of collectively developing language that would then be submitted to legislators to submit bills and things like that? Is that what you were meaning about legislation, or?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the idea of legislation is what did they say?
Sausage.
Yeah, what do they say? The healthcare bill is 2,500 pages or 25,000 pages. And so it's they say, I voted for this law or that law. That's not really what goes on. It's all about clause 2 and what they put in there. And so the thing that this would do is to, you would kind of track what actually goes into each law. And
Well, they do that now, you just can't see it.
right.
I mean, that's the, I was just at the Law via the Internet conference at Cornell 3 weeks ago. Clay Shirky was our keynote. And if you want to hear the 50-minute version of that talk, it's on the Law via the Internet 2012 website.
Can you say that again?
It's Law via the Internet 2012. It was at Cornell. And he basically gave an expanded version of that 18-minute TED talk. And it was good. I mean, one of the things with, it's like you were saying, there's that sort of split between, government transparency and access to government data, and then sort of civic-oriented apps kinds of stuff. Those 4 apps are kind of fall into that sort of civic action kind of space, which is cool. Stuff like Law via the Internet was all about, well, actually it's an international thing, but that was all about getting increased access to better government data. So, folks there were talking about how legislation gets encoded and how it gets, released and that sort of stuff. So, it's interesting. It's hard to tell which of those 4 would be, because I guess all of them you would sort of need to have that idea about which, what you wanted to do with them. I think more. It's tough when you're talking about some place the size of Atlanta, especially in sort of the, kind of the diversity of the, I mean, it's big and it covers a lot of ground and a lot of people and a lot of backgrounds and a lot of everything. And it's hard to, try and spot something that might be interesting to, folks in, folks in Virginia Highlands, and I live in Woodstock.
Or the very predominantly Korean community in Duluth. It's very, very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think that our goals anyway, short term, aren't going to be that.
Right.
I would say there's probably about 500 people using it. I don't think it's going to be got tough to do.
I like that, the language you put on it around civic-oriented apps. I think that makes it, so different, because I really struggle with spec work for government. You know, I work for a government, a company that 50% of our work is government work, and I watch some of these initiatives. And it's like, so you're getting people to do stuff for free instead of paying companies for it, when there are other contracts very similar to it that could be being bid out. And so it's how do you differentiate between those things that that get paid for versus those things that get done for free. And I think that civic, like anything that's creating civic action then is different than a government agency trying to get free work out of companies.
Yeah, and a lot of these don't really amount to the government actually trying to get free work. I mean, some of them are around sort of, you know, here's a bunch of data that, you know, we collect as the government, but we're not doing anything with it. You know, what would you do with it? And that's a good thing, because there's a lot of valuable data that the government collects. I mean, I've been working on, you know, getting court opinions for almost 20 years, and you still can't get them easily, you know, from anywhere. It's hard, and you know, the sort of access to government data is a whole sort of separate, you know, kind of nut to crack on a lot of this stuff. But the feds have been good with stuff like data.gov. There's a lot of cool stuff there. Not court opinions, but you know, and like with Georgia.gov going to Drupal, you know, there's the potential to tie a lot of perhaps open up some of the data that Georgia has through web services that, you know, can be built into Drupal. You know, and you know, the government should be encouraged to do stuff like that. And sometimes you have to do that kind of stuff for free in order to sort of get their attention, because they're not, you know, they don't want to share, mostly because, you know, well, they've got a thousand reasons, a lot of which boils down, a lot of them end up at the end of the day boiling down to the fact that, you know, that somebody's paying them, or that they're paying somebody to collect the data, and one of the things that you know, company's getting is some kind of control over the data, when it really should just belong to the government, because the government paid for it. That's our money.
But I think the thing to take away is it's like really early days in this whole thing, and like, so there's a lot going on. I mean, it's really ballooning, and it's happening right now, but it's still the first, you know, it's the first cycle, the first iteration, and you know, that's what we do, right? Like computer people, like we got one line of code that's off, the whole thing doesn't work, but then you got to do it again, and it gets a little bit better. And so that's the approach you got to take on this, just like keep getting another chunk bitten off.
I'm in. I talked to Terry about it last week at Remix, so I'm super excited about it.
Okay, so yeah, you know, feel free to email me or come next week and
Where's
give
the-
ideas or any other.
Where's the meeting next week?
It's going to be at ATDC at Georgia Tech.
Will you be posting your meetups on openatlanta.net, or is there a meetup.com subsite or anything like that?
There will be, there's not yet, right?
There's a meetup.
Or if I follow you on Twitter, will I see it?
Yeah, when you go to openatlanta.net, and it'll lead you to the meetup site. It's also on Facebook.
Okay.
I really wish I wish Facebook and Meetup would like to get together.
Good luck.
Maybe they need open data.
Is there any tax deductions for working on stuff like this?
If you write the app to track it.
Maybe driving to the ATDC or something. I don't know, do we not,
Yeah,
I don't know,
volunteer
my-
mileage, exactly. It's probably not a qualified 501c3, so.
Right, you need to put together a nonprofit.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff first. And
Yeah, there is.
that's a little bit of work.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds
I have the URL for the LVI
What is
thing.
that?
Yeah, it's blog.law.cornell.edu /
Okay.
/ LVI 2012 /
So are you a journalist or that you're interested in?
Well, actually, I work for a nonprofit that's a consortium of law schools, and we do. Our focus is on legal education, obviously, but we do as part of that. Obviously, making better lawyers means giving law students better access to the law, and that's sort of where our involvement is. And I've actually been involved since like 94, 95, way back when the courts first started putting, it was like back in those, when the web was first getting started, even kind of pre-web almost, some of the courts were releasing opinions, usually as word processor files on FTP sites, primarily so that lawyers and the press could get their hands on them, on the day of release. And so I built my first collection of those back in, I think it was 95. And and now it's it's a thing. I mean, we've got a project called the Free Law Review that has just over 750,000 cases in it, mostly federal, some state stuff that we're trying to figure out how to get sort of more into and stuff. So, but I've been building sites with Drupal for 8 years. So I know a lot about Drupal. WordPress too.
At the last hackathon, I worked with some people that were getting into Python and scraping the web, and
Yeah, I'm not a fan of scrapers, but yeah, it's sometimes the only way to get at the data. The problem with scraping court opinions is you get a lot of PDFs, and then you have to figure out what to do with the PDFs. So you have to like take the text out and do that, use all the format, and you can't get metadata, and it's hard to figure out. It is all about metadata. Any legal stuff, anything with like legislation or regulations or court opinions or anything like that. It's really all about the metadata that helps tell you what the structure of all that is and what it means. Sort of in addition to the text. And if you have just the text, then that's fine. That's a place to start. But you still need a way to identify the metadata and to add that metadata in. So that's actually one of the problems with using GitHub. GitHub loves text, but it's hard to put metadata into text files. I mean, you can do it, but it's just kind of funky because it just looks like this block of strange text sitting in a file. So there's, some work that needs to be done there too.
do you work with like NoSQL databases?
No, I'm a big MySQL fan. So either that or just the file system. Either one. I mean, the case law stuff that I build, I just put the opinions in the file system, and the metadata all gets marked up in the HTML files as meta tags. I use Apache Solr, build search on top of all that. So. Oh, I love it.
Well, thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.